You're listening to Big World Network.
Phineas Frakture and the Terror of Dr. Melondi. Written by Joseph Gatch. Read by Michael Young. Phineas staggered his way back to the hotel after an all-day drinking binge with a man who wasn't there, talking about scientific theories and engineering. Surprisingly, Griffin was of higher-than-average intelligence, having created an invisibility formula by himself. His morals left something to be desired, though. Phineas had wondered where the man kept his money, until he caught the man relieving others of their wallets. That's when he thanked him for the drinks, and took his leave of the transparent thief. Upon entering the hotel, Phineas was accosted by a soot-covered newsboy, who waved a paper in his face.
"Oi, governor, don't you want to read about the mad scientist demands?"
the boy shouted after him, when Phineas pushed his way past.
"What mad scientist?"
Phineas asked, quickly turning.
"The one that's got all the bombs around the city."
"And what's he want?"
"The country, of course. He's holding us all for ransom. Aye, ain't you going to buy a paper?"
"Oh, why should I? You just told me the story," said Phineas.
"Bloody Americans,"
muttered the boy.
"Watch your mouth,"
shouted back Phineas.
"and go to school. You're in England. Learn how to speak English properly." "You should talk Yank. Can't barely understand your accent."
Phineas kept walking, wishing he'd had his Tesla rod to zap the little bugger and teach him some manners. When he opened the door to his room, he found Constable Fuller, William, Abigail, and a man wearing a cheap tweed suit.
"Where have you been?" asked William. "We've been waiting hours for you."
"Next door. Having a drink, or eat. I was giving you space, like you asked," Phineas answered, his words tinged with a bit of spite.
"Well, we've had enough space. There's a crisis right now."
"And this affects me how?" asked Phineas, popping himself into an armchair. Fuller stepped forward.
"Professor Frakture, this is Inspector Morsley from the Yard. He will explain."
The man in tweed started pacing.
"Since you disarmed the last bomb—"
"Oh, so now I disarmed it," said Phineas.
"Yes, since you disarmed the bomb, this Dr. M knows that you did. Don't ask me how. He has upped his game, so to speak. He delivered a new ultimatum to the paper today. He states that if you, personally, do not issue an apology to him, he will detonate 4 bombs at midnight tonight."
"No," Phineas said flatly.
Morrisley's jaw dropped. But there are hundreds of lives at stake. How could you not?"
"I don't apologize for stopping a bomb from blowing me into the afterlife. I don't apologize for trying to find this man to get my money back. And quite frankly, I don't apologize. Period."
"He doesn't,"
said William.
"I've never heard one," added Abigail. "Well, but what are we to do?" asked Fuller.
"What time is it?" asked Phineas.
2 minutes after 6,
stated William. "That gives us just under 6 hours to find and disarm them."
"You're going to help us?"
added Morrissey. "I believe that was the implication I was making. Besides, no one demands an apology from me and isn't forced to regret it. First things first, give me some coffee, not the burnt toast stuff they serve next door. Second, start spreading your men across the city to help locate and secure the bombs."
"And then?" asked Morrissey.
"And then," Phineas wrote something down on a piece of paper. "I want this." He handed it to the inspector. Fully caffeinated and starting to feel more like himself, Phineas walked outside the hotel where a police wagon was parked in front. The look on his face was that of an instructor about to annihilate his students with an exam of monumental proportions as he approached the wagon and the inspector standing behind it. "Do you have it?" Phineas asked. "It took some persuading, but the gentleman finally gave it up," Morrissey said, opening up the back of the wagon. Inside was a prototype of a personal rotocopter. "Where did you hear about this thing?" asked William, who was also waiting outside. "The last issue of Popular Mechanica had an article on it. I've been dying to try it out." "You might just do that," William said, examining the thing. "Why don't you let Abigail fly it? Well, she's the pilot." "But she doesn't know how to defuse a bomb," Phineas replied. "Are your men spread out yet?" he asked the inspector as he hauled the machine out of the wagon. "Reluctantly. And they would rather find a place where there aren't any bombs." "What about person-to-person communications?" "That is strictly military. It hasn't trickled down to the civilian sector yet," said Morrissey. "How do you plan to spot the bombs from above in this fog?" "Our good friend, Dr. M, is going to show me where they are," said Phineas as he sat down and strapped himself into the copter. "What? Why would he do that?" Fuller asked as she approached with Abigail. "His blinking lights," replied Phineas. "Down here in the fog, we can't really see them until we're up close, but from above the light disperses into the fog much farther. It will be a beacon guiding me right to them." "Are you sure that you can fly this thing?" asked William. "We'll soon find out. Get clear." Phineas started up the rotor and planted his feet on the pedals used to steer the contraption. He gripped the handles that protruded from the armrest of the seat and took a deep breath as he pushed the throttle forward. The tiny steam engine behind him began chugging faster. The rotor sped up, and he felt the device lifting off of the ground. A quick bout of panic sent him careening towards the hotel, where the rotor sliced off a banner that was hanging out front, whipping it through the air. "Sorry!" Phineas shouted. He regained control and shot upwards. "There goes the bravest man I know," said Fuller, gazing up at the receding copter. "And if you ever kiss him again," said Abigail, "I will remove your lips with a resonant dedullerator. Understand?" Fuller glared at her. "Quite." Once he was clear of the buildings, Phineas soon got the hang of the copter. Below, the gaslights twinkled through the fog, mirroring the stars above. He inhaled deeply and coughed violently in the cleaner air. Phineas pulled out a map of London as he hovered and took his bearings as best he could, searching for the most likely spots that bombs would be placed. He didn't have to wait for long. There was a change in the pattern of lights down below. One started to give off a greenish glow and then started blinking on and off. Then he saw another several miles away, and then still another. Phineas gave whoever left the bombs enough time to leave before he descended, and then swooped in on the first light. To his delight, there was one of the bombs sitting in the alley, waiting to go off. There wasn't enough room to land between the buildings, so he dropped at the alley mouth, turned off the copter, and raced into the alley. The configuration of the bomb was slightly different than the last one, and it took him longer than he liked to defuse it. Cutting a gap in the wires long enough so that they couldn't be reattached, Phineas then ran back to the copter, where he found several people looking at it. "Excuse me," pushing his way to the pilot's seat.
"Aye, what do you think you're doing?" demanded a very large man who was examining the boiler.
"Sorry, no time to talk."
"He's a bloody Yank!"
exclaimed an old woman.
"Probably had a spy on us."
The big one grabbed Phineas's coat in a meaty fist.
"That right? You a spy? Let's show 'em what we does to spies around here."
"I am not a spy, and I really need to leave. Now, if you will just all step back."
"What's going on?"
shouted a man coming out of the fog. A constable appeared, rapping his billiard club along the building's wall. "Officer," said Phineas, "the first bomb is in that alley." The mention of a bomb suddenly sent the small crowd in every direction. It's been disarmed, but it needs to be secured.
Oh, you're that Frakture fellow that we are told about. Nice contraption. You're off to find the next one?
I was until those hoodlums stopped me.
Ah, they're nothing to worry about. Just some folks out looking for fun,
said the constable. Their fun has cost me some valuable time. If you don't mind, I'll be on my way now, Phineas replied testily as he started the engine. The copter took to the air once more. The next two bombs were easier than the first to disarm. However, the distance between them caused delay. Phineas looked at his watch and found that there were only 20 minutes left until midnight. He pushed the throttle and felt the engine sputter slightly.
Not now,
he muttered, hoping that the engine had enough fuel to make it to the last bomb. He finally spotted the blinking light, set the copter into a controlled dive towards it. Phineas was unbelted and out of the machine by the time it touched down. Hurriedly, he opened the casing of the last bomb. What the hell? The bomb was empty. It was nothing but a dummy. Phineas checked his watch. 5 minutes until midnight. Quickly, he returned to the copter and started it. The engine sputtered a couple of times and died. He tried again and again, so the 5th time it finally started, and Phineas jammed the throttle forward, sending the copter straight up. He went as high as he dared, and started scanning for any more blinking lights. Off in the distance, he saw one just as it started blinking faster and faster. Phineas felt a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, and watched helplessly from above. There was a flash of light, and a 2-mile diameter stretch of London disappeared. Buildings, people, fog, and all. From on high, Phineas watched as the surrounding fog crept in until it covered the decimated area. There was an odd sound following the occurrence, and Phineas raised an eyebrow. I'll be damned. It does go. Pfft.
You're listening to Big World Network.